In the CMA syllabus, business unit profitability analysis is where the real big picture happens. Think about it. As a management accountant, you aren't just looking at individual, tiny units anymore. You're looking at entire divisions, massive branches, and sprawling territories. We're going to break all of this down together today, making absolutely sure you are totally prepared for the exam.
Okay, let's dive into this. This is the very first question we have to ask ourselves when we look at a business unit. The primary challenge we face in this whole section of the syllabus is fairness. Seriously, how in the world do we accurately measure a manager's true performance without unfairly blaming them for costs they literally cannot control? It's a really tricky balancing act.
Here is our game plan for today's explainer. We'll cover the controllability principle, segmented income statements, the common cost trap, ROI versus residual income, and finally, your winning exam strategy. Let's get to it.
Starting off with Chapter 1, the controllability principle, specifically looking at responsibility accounting.
So here's the official CMA terminology you need to memorize. Responsibility accounting. It's the practice of only holding managers accountable for what they can actually influence. Let's put that into perspective. Imagine corporate headquarters suddenly decides to buy a massive, incredibly expensive new building, right? And then they allocate a huge portion of that enormous rent down to a small, modest branch out in Ohio. That Ohio branch manager should not be penalized for a corporate real estate decision they had absolutely no say in.
Because of that reality, we have to strictly separate these two concepts. Evaluating segment performance, which is how the unit is doing as a whole, is an entirely different beast than evaluating managerial performance, which is strictly looking at what the manager actually controls. Keeping these two ideas distinct in your mind is an absolute must for mastering this section of the exam.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, Segmented Income Statements. This, right here, is the gold standard.
I'm telling you, examiners absolutely love this reporting format. Unlike a standard company-wide report, a segmented income statement breaks down costs by how they relate specifically to the business unit. We have 3 distinct levels of profit here. First up is the contribution margin, which includes variable costs but excludes all fixed costs. That makes it perfect for pricing and volume decisions. Second, we have the segment margin, which includes traceable fixed costs but excludes common allocated costs. That one is your go-to for deciding whether to keep or drop a unit. And finally, operating income, which includes all costs and is used for overall company reporting.
Let's see how this builds, kind of cascading down the steps of profit. Step 1. Sales minus all variable costs equals your contribution margin. This just tells us if the unit's volume is fundamentally healthy. Step 2. Contribution margin minus traceable fixed costs equals our segment margin. Now, traceable fixed costs are things like the local advertising budget or the local manager's salary. Basically, costs that would completely disappear if we close the unit down. Step 3. Segment margin minus allocated common costs leaves us with our final operating income. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the crucial takeaway right here. The segment margin is your ultimate decider. It's the CMA magic number. And I want to give you a massive warning right now as your teacher. Never, ever use operating income to judge a business unit manager. Remember, operating income includes allocated corporate overhead, things like the CEO's salary, which the local manager has zero control over. Always look at the segment margin.
Which brings us nicely into Chapter 3, the common costs trap. You really have to beware of allocated costs.
To understand the trap, we first need to define common costs. These are the shared expenses that support more than one business unit across the entire company. We're talking about centralized departments, human resources, corporate legal, or IT. The exam will very often throw a tricky scenario at you where a specific division looks like it's bleeding money simply because it's been burdened with sky-high allocated common costs.
Whenever you see that scenario pop up, I want you to remember this quote like it's a golden law of accounting. If a segment is generating a positive segment margin, it is contributing to the company's overall health. Lock this into your memory for exam day.
So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding the mistake companies make. The mistake is dropping a division that has a positive segment margin just because its final bottom line operating income is negative. If you fall for this trap and close the division, guess what? Those massive common costs from HR and IT won't magically disappear. The corporate office still has to pay them. Instead, those exact same costs will just be shoved onto the remaining divisions, which actively decreases your company's total overall profit.
Let's shift gears to Chapter 4, ROI versus residual income for measuring performance. So, we have return on investment, or ROI, versus residual income, or RI. Comparing these two heavy hitters side by side reveals a critical strategic difference. ROI has a major flaw. It can lead to goal congruence issues. A manager with a fantastic ROI might actually reject a highly profitable new project just because it would slightly lower their current high average ROI. Residual income, on the other hand, provides an absolute dollar amount. Its massive benefit is that it encourages a manager to take on literally any project that earns more than the company's cost of capital.
Let's quickly ground that comparison in the mathematical mechanics. The formula for ROI is super straightforward. Operating income divided by average invested capital. It gives you a percentage, which is really easy to digest, but as we just discussed, it mathematically motivates managers to protect their shiny percentage rather than growing the company's total wealth.
And here is the formula for residual income. Operating income minus the result of your target rate of return multiplied by invested capital. This beautifully illustrates exactly why this calculation aligns managerial goals with corporate goals. Because it calculates an absolute dollar amount of profit above the required return, managers are highly incentivized to say yes to growth rather than guarding a static percentage.
All right, home stretch. Chapter 5, Winning Exam Strategy, and our strategic summary.
First off, take a deep breath. You are doing great and making excellent progress. Let's move into our final rapid-fire checklist. When you sit down for the exam and you see a business unit question pop up, I want you to ask yourself these 3 vital questions immediately. 1. Is the cost variable or fixed? 2. If it is a fixed cost, is it traceable to the unit or is it a common cost shared across the company? And 3. Are we currently evaluating the manager or are we evaluating the segment as a whole? Mastering these 3 specific distinctions will help you absolutely fly through this section of the syllabus.
To make sure this really clicks before we wrap, I'm leaving you with a final pop quiz. If a division has a positive contribution margin but a negative segment margin, what exactly does that tell you about their fixed costs? Think back to the cascading steps of profit we walked through earlier. I want you to puzzle over that, trust your training, and keep that incredible study momentum going. I will see you all in our next explainer.